Hyperfocus is highly focused attention which lasts for a long time. Before I talk about that, I want to remind you that I'm a disabled content creator and I make disability lifestyle content every week here on YouTube. So if you'd like to hear more from me, please consider subscribing to my channel. Hyperfocus describes the experience of focusing on something so intently that you lose all track of time and the world around you. I first came across the notion of hyperfocus when I was researching ADHD, and I kept finding it described as an ADHD trait. Naturally, everyone can experience hyperfocus, so I wanted to know if it really is more common in people with ADHD. I found a 2018 study from the University of Florida and the University of Michigan which demonstrates that hyperfocus is in fact more commonly experienced in people with ADHD. The study involved administering a hyperfocus questionnaire to 623 people, 185 of whom met the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. The results showed that people with more severe ADHD symptoms reported experiencing hyperfocus more often. And everyone who met the diagnostic criteria for ADHD scored more highly on the hyperfocus questionnaire. Whilst the cause of hyperfocus in people with ADHD is not yet known, it is theorised that it results from a shortage of the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine in the brain. The result is that people with ADHD have difficulty switching from one task to another. So if we're doing something fun, enjoyable and rewarding, we tend to stick with it rather than moving on to the next task or appointment. In addition, our brains are drawn to activities which give instant feedback. So if we're pulled into an activity which meets our brain's need for stimulation and feedback, this can result in hyperfocus. When I first heard about hyperfocus, it sounded like an asset. If my brain tended towards hyperfocus, perhaps I could harness it to get lots of work done or achieve something great. And whilst it's true that hyperfocus directed at something useful would be helpful, it definitely has its downsides. The first is that it isn't easy to choose what your brain will hyperfocus on. Since the brain is looking for stimulation, it will tend to focus on the activities that provide that. In my case, my brain likes to hyperfocus on Twitter, video games and television. Not overly useful. Not the tasks and commitments that would be the most productive and help me meet my goals. Unless my goals are to collect all the insects on Animal Crossing and watch every Paul Rudd movie ever made. The other downside of hyperfocus is that it can prevent you from staying on top of essential self-care. It's easy for me to forget to eat or take rest breaks because I was so absorbed in something that I forgot everything else. It can also lead to missed work deadlines and missed appointments. Basically, it can prevent focus from being directed where it needs to be because my brain fancied scrolling Twitter for several hours and forgot that it had anything else to do. However, hyperfocus can be brilliant if it's directed at something useful and you use strategies to stay on top of your other commitments and your self-care. So I've been researching ways to direct hyperfocus and strategies to ensure that you don't get lost in one activity for too long. First, how to harness hyperfocus and get things done. So choose a task. Make sure that you've got everything that you need to complete that task in your workspace, because if you have to go and fetch something that you forgot, you could end up being completely distracted. Create the right atmosphere and work in a space designed to prevent distractions. Keep your workspace tidy and turn off all non-essential notifications on your phone. Figure out what works for you, sound and light-wise. I find music with lyrics distracting, but instrumental music can help me to focus. Experiment with different options until your environment is optimal for you to be able to focus. Find ways to make your tasks offer your brain the features that are most likely to make it hyperfocus. This is that they give instant feedback, are active or interactive, are fast-paced and are enjoyable. Whilst it might not be possible for your task to tick all of those boxes, even just some of them increases your chance of being able to hyperfocus. For me, I enjoy my work and I found a way to make it fast-paced by using the Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique is a popular productivity strategy often recommended for people with ADHD, and here's how it works. Set a timer for 25 minutes. Focus exclusively on your task for 25 minutes. Take a 10-minute rest and reward break. I find rewarding myself with a nice cup of tea or a piece of chocolate meets my brain's need for instant gratification really well. And repeat. You can adjust the times. I've found that 40 minutes works better for me than 25 minutes, so play with that and find your rhythm, but I've found this a really useful strategy for getting things done and encouraging my brain to hyper-focus on the task I am involved with. I've found that this technique has helped me to slip into hyperfocus and get more done with less procrastination. This technique is also a great way to ensure that you don't lose yourself in hyperfocus and forget to eat, rest, or take care of other commitments and appointments. Some other strategies that I've found to prevent hyperfocus from negatively impacting your life are: prioritize your tasks and set a time limit for each one so that you don't end up spending too much time on any one thing. Set reminders for appointments and self-care tasks like eating and resting. I set my reminder app to give me plenty of time ahead of appointments so that I have time to get organised and be punctual. Set time limits and alarms for leisure activities which tend to result in hyperfocus. That way you won't stay up all night playing video games or lose an entire afternoon reading Reddit. Ask people to text you, phone you, or if they live with you, distract you at certain times during the day. This can help break up periods of hyperfocus. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If you did, please hit the like button. Thanks to the Purple people for their support. If you'd like to find out more, including the perks of joining my club, hit the join button for more information.